Sir, did you have?
Yeah, I mean, well, you guys kind of run to the gamut: disaster relief, education, economic security. You talk about fires and biblical floods, and they're affecting about half of our counties. Well, foreclosures is a biblical catastrophe that's devastated our communities. It's affected every single one of our counties.
Right.
Where's the disaster relief for foreclosure victims? Because as our AG signed on to essentially the criminal prosecution of the banks for the fraudulent mortgages, and I know they made a settlement before criminal charges actually. We were a part of that, and those you've just heard that even those in the $25 billion settlement, even those aren't being followed, because in Colorado, in the law, there's no mechanism for a homeowner to actually challenge this. On education, we know, studies have shown that families who are facing fraudulent foreclosures and trying to fight through fraudulent mortgages, their kids lose grade points. They lose grade point average. They lose the attention of their parents. We're talking about economic security. What greater economic security issue is there than us being wrongfully kicked out of our homes? And the people of this state, all we really need is for our legislators to stand up and say that the constitutional due process needs to apply to Colorado foreclosure laws. And constantly, we had a bill that was killed last year that didn't really even open up the 120 hearings. All it did was say that the opposing attorney, when he signs that statement, can be held accountable under perjury if they're wrong, if they've lied. Now, what we're asking for isn't, it's not an enormous issue, but no one is talking about it. And our legislator, we've spoken with McCann. She has backed completely off trying to change the 120 hearing. You're telling us that's something that's completely different than we're hearing from McCann.
Well, I haven't talked to Representative McCann in a little while on it, but I mean, so, one, I think the bill last year went a lot farther than what you're saying it did.
No, sir, it didn't.
I read the bill.
I am an expert on the bill, and I have read the bill, and I was with everybody writing it, and I have been wrongfully foreclosed on. And as far as opening up the 120 hearing, it did none of the things that we suggested as a community, as a foreclosure rights community, that we suggested that the bill do to open the 120 hearing. All it did was add the statement that the opposing attorney would be held accountable under perjury if they were wrong. It was that simple. And this bill was killed, and it is not part of the agenda for this next legislative session. And we aren't talking about something that's affecting half our county. We're talking about tens of thousands of families. Montbello, 56% of the homes in the last 10 years have been foreclosed on in Montbello. The community has been pushed out. The community has been broken. How can a community fight education reforms that they don't like if half of the community is struggling to stay in their home and fight a bank mortgage that was wrong in the first place? We're not talking about, you mentioned, or I'm sorry to go on, this is a big issue. You mentioned earlier that there were bad notes that happened. These bad notes didn't happen. They are wrongful foreclosures, or they are wrongful mortgages that were written specifically fraudulent. And that was well determined in the $25 billion. No, only by studies, about 90% of them, by studies that have happened in other cities. Now, we really, and you are my representative. I hope that I can come and get a meeting with you. I would really like for you to, bare minimum, consider sponsoring a strike-through bill that would at least allow us to strike through the portions of our foreclosure laws that allow an opposing attorney to certify that they win the case. If you could do just that, it would be an enormous help for the people.
Happy to sit down and talk to you. I mean, I think what we need to do is look at all the foreclosure laws that have been changed over the last couple of years and figure out going forward how we get a fair system. We have a unique system with the public trustee versus a lot of other states who have a judicial system. Is there a conversation? Should we, and I only have one more year, this is not a conversation that'll be done in a year. But should we move to a judicial system versus a public trustee system? How does that, what's the benefits, what's the detriments of that? There are both sides of the argument. So it's a complicated issue, and you know that being on this issue. It can be sold as really easy, but it's really not. And it's that's why it's taken a long time to deal with this. We've tried to make incremental steps. We'll hopefully try to make incremental steps this year. But it is one, and I agree with you. In fact, that's why when I got in the legislature, I did several bills on foreclosure because it was harming and hurting my entire community.
As someone who gets phone calls, who dreads answering my phone because I'm gonna get a call from 2 or 3 people every week who've never missed a payment, who've done nothing wrong, who suddenly are losing their homes and have no right to defend themselves. The one thing you need to do as a legislator, as a legislation, I guess, is recognize that it won't matter how many foreclosure bills you pass if you don't do something about the 120 hearing. Because the 120 hearing is where our constitutional rights have been stripped. And they were stripped in 2006 with a 68-page bill. Our current foreclosure law is only 66 or 67 pages long. That bill was 68 pages long. They rewrote it to strip our rights. It needs to be changed.